Brian Marsh from Mowery Marsh Architects.
I'm Jen Marsh from Mowery Marsh Architects.
We are about to head over to our Madison Passive House project. Before we head over, we thought we would just give a little sort of background on us. We're an architecture firm out of Hoboken, New Jersey, and we do mostly passive house projects or apply passive house thinking to most of our projects. We started with our own house where we're standing here now back in 2012, where we applied passive house thinking to our projects, and that's where we started to learn and struggle.
We learned a lot. Our blower door wasn't so great, but we then went on to do another passive house in town, and we got better at that one. And renovations are tricky, so we cut ourselves some slack. But then we did a third renovation in Jersey City. We did even better. And then we went on and moved on to a brand new construction in Madison. Probably our biggest obstacle there was finding a contractor to do the work. We thought we had somebody lined up, and it didn't work out. And at the 11th hour, we had to put something together. And I don't know how you did it, but somehow you managed to cobble together a team. We had a typical home builder to start with, and then actually found someone that was learning how to do passive.
A passive house tradesman. We reached out to different vendors to find out who was using the different products to create a passive house. And so there was one name that popped up where he was buying some tapes and some air barriers products. Called Jason up, and we had a conversation with him on the phone, and I said, yeah, well, let's set up a meeting. And he came over to our house where
sat at the kitchen table and
we went over the idea of building this passive house, which he's never actually done a certified passive house project before, and we went from there, and we were able to bring him into the team with the regular general contractor and talk to them about collaborating as a group.
And it was a remarkable team, in that you don't always get people that are willing to try something new and bring new people on they're not used to working with, but everyone had the right attitude, and we're really excited about it. So we're excited to take you over there and talk to Jason about it a little bit more.
So we'll head on over now.
We're here in Madison, New Jersey, at our first new construction passive house that Brian and I completed. And we're here with Jason Endres of Endres Home Building.
So you're a third generation home builder, and you're working with your dad. What was your motivation to switch gears and attempt to build a passive house project?
I always knew there was a better way to build. From when I first started working with my father when I was a kid to running jobs myself, the building assembly has not changed, and I knew there was better technology to use and implement.
After taking training classes and becoming a certified tradesman for passive house, how did you start to apply these standards to your work?
I first focused on the air sealing. I wanted to get myself familiar with the membranes and the tapes and the adhesives.
Did architects specify those things, or were you just deciding to use them because you knew it was better?
No, I mean, the architects we worked with didn't really know or focus on any air sealing items.
You just out of the goodness of your heart knew that it was the better way to do it. That's great. Did the clients know what you were doing, or?
When I first started to use the interior membranes, they obviously knew that this was different. So they asked questions. I educated them on it. Once they knew what it was and what it was for, they were all for it.
So what was the biggest difference between like how you would approach building a conventional house versus a passive house?
With a passive house, there's what my wife likes to call staring at the ceiling at night. getting all the air sealing details right, trying to figure out what can go wrong, and getting everyone on board.
So when you look at, say, our drawings for passive house projects, how is that any different from when you looked at drawings for doing a conventional project? Like, how you thought about your methods and means? You go about it the same way, it's just more complicated?
Going from conventional plans to passive plans, it's like there's a lot more detail, a lot more pages, things to plan for.
You know, as passive house architects, what we're putting in the drawings, we're trying to specify materials we know are available, in increments we know are available, checked out structurally. It's laid out, but at the same time, you're then having another pass over it of, you know, there's still things that we tweak in the field, right? There's still...
Oh yeah, there's
conditions you're finding that may not have been covered, and so we're coming to the site and talking through those.
I mean, passive house wants to just be a box. The hard part is trying to get some flair, trying to get some, you know, design into it, and you know, those aspects of it, you know, need to be talked through. From what I was used to before, I mean, architects never visited sites. They weren't really involved in the actual build. I feel like you guys are very unique with that. You're very involved, and that really only enhances the build of the structure.
Switching topics a little bit, on materials, did you ever have trouble sourcing these materials, or you always had ways to get what you needed?
In the beginning, when my network of suppliers wasn't really established, yes. I feel like now it's definitely a lot easier to get those passive house materials and know the expected lead time on those materials.
So in your opinion, what's the most important trait of a passive house builder?
Definitely patience, care, discipline, a strong back for whipping.
Because you have to keep everybody working on these parts and pieces in line, because it's such a rigor in how it's put together.
I mean, the bottom line is you want to work with people that care and are easy to work with. Knowing what to expect from a certain trade, like, oh, I know they're gonna make a hole here and they're not gonna seal it, so I have to know that going in, and I have
Preemptive conversations.
I have to expect to, you know, have that conversation.
Once or twice.
Yeah.
So after you're finished, what has been the experience that you've seen with clients with their project? Is it different for them than a regular conventional house? Are they more satisfied?
It's hard not to notice when you walk into a passive house that it's significantly different. The climate's different. Clients definitely notice that this is a robust structure that feels like no other house they've been in. So what made you guys get into passive?
Wait a second, you're flipping it on us. When I worked on the first passive house project in New York State and designing it and seeing it be built that way, and you say, how can I go back to a conventional way of construction? What do I do when I get to the top of the foundation wall and I'm changing from concrete to wood, and there's this 12-inch void, and you're like, what happens? There's no insulation. It's cold. What am I doing? And that doesn't seem right. And it wasn't until we decided to make a commitment in our office to build a passive house that we really tried to figure out, how do we make that jump? How do we fill that gap? How do we make that void where everyone's always cold at that sill plate in their house? How do you fix that? And that kind of was like, well, this makes a lot of sense.
So Brian was detailing and building and experiencing the building of a passive house. I hadn't done that yet. We went to go renovate our own house. We had a really minimal budget, but we made a shift in our head because I was like, okay, if we're gonna promote this and we're gonna go for this and we're gonna try to, have new clients buy into passive house, I think I have to experience it. I have to see how we're gonna build it, and mainly I want to live in it, and so I can express to people what it feels like. And it's still hard to express it until someone walks into a house to really get a sense of the cocoon type feeling that it has, lack of temperature fluctuation, and it's kind of like you're wrapped in a blanket somehow. And I would not have, and the air quality, I wouldn't have been able to talk to people about that as passionately and sincerely if we hadn't been living in it. And we didn't even do a very good, we broke all sorts of rules, and then here at Madison, this was the first full on where we got the blower door and we can do it, okay. And we make it not just a box, able to make it appealing, a mass appeal to people, that, the windows are gonna be wherever they want these windows, and they're gonna be big, and they're not gonna be limited, and they can, we're doing ethanol fireplace, or, whether, what kind of hood can I have, and then we're gonna figure those things out so that you're not being limited by the kind of house you're gonna have. And because the reality is we're getting people to do passive houses that didn't come to us wanting passive houses.
I'm going through the same thing with my house. It's gonna, fix this, and it's like, oh, but where's the air barrier? Well, then you're like, oh, I'll just rip this down, and what about the other part? I got to rip that off.
We did our own renovation. We had to make that jump. That okay, if we're gonna try to get it close to passive, we have to do the whole test in the envelope of the house, and everything else is just gonna come when it comes. We might have a kitchen, but we're gonna have we can't go back and re-air seal, or we can't go back and re-insulate.
Clients will spend a premium for interior finishes, but they'll not really think about the assembly.
And I think that's where we feel like we have to have the clients trust that, we lived it, we see the value in it. You won't look back and be like, oh, why did I make this so airtight?
The common question is that I get all the time, especially from other contractors, is, a house has to breathe. And they're 100% right. It does have to breathe, but we have to control the breathing.
Controlling the breathing, that is really huge. I mean, again, our house being in a city, it's, we lived in many places where, the soot is coming through the sockets, right? Like you can see the dirt coming into the house from outside. And so having controlled air quality is huge. I mean, people will come into our house and they'll be there for 5 or 10 minutes. I haven't sneezed, it'll be in the middle of spring and no allergies. And that's hard to quantify that for people, but there's definitely more people that when you say air quality, it means something to them more now than I feel like it did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You can actually get some people that way.
Once you peek through the veil, into the passive world, it's hard to go back.
We're in Madison, New Jersey today, where we're actually just starting our second certified passive house project in Madison. So Jason can show you a little bit of what we're doing over here.
And what we are doing first is laying 2 inches of sand. We are screeding the sand, making sure it's smooth, and then once that's done, we lay down the 6-inch foam glass, and we use a sealant around the edges to seal all these blocks together. So yeah, what this is a jig I made up, and all it does essentially is screed the sand, makes everything smooth, so the foam glass sits perfectly level, flush with the sand.